Hello and welcome to Nest Egg Guru. A common complaint among both consumers and financial advisors is the wide disparity in results produced by different retirement planning calculators. In this short video, we will explore why and how this happens. To begin, there are two basic factors that determine the results produced by all retirement planning applications: the inputs that the user is required to enter and the mathematical methodology that is used to produce the results. The latter is essentially the engine under the hood. In terms of methodologies, there are three basic retirement calculator engine designs. Expected return calculators. Expected return calculators simply require the user to specify a rate of return he or she expects to earn on his or her portfolio as the basis for generating illustrations. These applications are generally regarded as unreliable and overly optimistic because, in assuming a constant annual rate of return for all assets, they fail to account for the possibility of negative market returns. Temporal order historical backtesting calculators. Calculators that employ historical backtesting can offer a fun way for investors to see how their nest eggs may have fared through various past market conditions. However, as a planning tool, their real-world applicability is limited because, number one, it is extremely unlikely that the market returns will be repeated in the same order in the future, and number two, such applications fail to account for the possibility that future return scenarios may be more challenging than those we have encountered in the past. Monte Carlo simulation calculators. Calculators that employ Monte Carlo analysis often apply an algorithm to run hundreds or even thousands of simulations based upon either internal mean return and portfolio volatility assumptions or based upon random sampling of historical return data. Calculators that employ Monte Carlo simulations are generally more highly regarded than the other two methodologies because they are able to illustrate potential investment environments that may be worse than the historical record. This video discussion focuses only on differences produced by calculators that employ Monte Carlo simulations. Specifically, we will examine how input differences and assumption differences may produce different results by comparing two similarly designed and structured retirement income planning applications: Vanguard's Retirement Nest Egg Calculator and Nest Egg Guru's Retirement Spending Calculator. Vanguard's Retirement Nest Egg Calculator is a popular free web-based application that aims to help users determine the likelihood that their retirement nest eggs may last throughout retirement. As you can see, the calculator requires just four basic inputs. To begin our comparison, let's assume a 30-year retirement time horizon, a $1 million initial retirement nest egg, a $45,000 initial withdrawal rate, and an initial asset allocation of 60% stocks, 30% bonds, and 10% cash. As disclosed on the Vanguard website, the calculator simulation engine employs random sampling of historical return data. The underlying index data are composed of a large cap U.S. stock index, a U.S. corporate bond index, and T-bill index monthly returns spanning the period from 1926 until 2009. The calculator also adjusts for inflation each year based on random sampling of historical CPI index data over the same period. Withdrawals are made proportionally from each asset class, and the initial allocation is maintained throughout the illustrated time horizon. Based upon this data, let's take a look at the results. As you can see, in this example, the initial 4.5% withdrawal rate was successful and sustainable in approximately 87% of the simulations. Now let's run the same general inputs using Nest Egg Guru's Retirement Spending Calculator. As with the Vanguard calculator, we will assume a 30-year retirement time horizon. We will assume an initial retirement nest egg of $1 million and an initial withdrawal rate of $45,000. However, as you can see, Nest Egg Guru includes a separate input for the user to enter his or her own annual inflation adjustment, instead of incorporating this as a random internal adjustment. For the record, this is because Nest Egg Guru believes method more realistically reflects the way consumers manage their savings. However, in this example, let's use 3% annual cost of living increased, as that is roughly in line with the historical mean in the Vanguard dataset. In the next input, Nest Egg Guru allows users to adjust for future expected income increases or decreases that are unrelated to inflation adjustments. To maintain as much of an apples-to-apples comparison between the two applications as possible, we will assume no such adjustments are made. We will assume the same 60-30-10 asset allocation ratio in both calculators. However, instead of using a single large cap U.S. stock index, Nest Egg Guru allows users to incorporate their exposure to mid and small cap stocks and to foreign stocks. Furthermore, the monthly return data used in Nest Egg Guru spans the period from the modern era of the stock market from 1970 until 2014, instead of the 1926 until 2009 data employed by Vanguard. Because the index data used in each calculator covers different periods and different asset classes, we will simply use the default inputs for the detailed stock allocation in Nest Egg Guru. The next input represents another significant departure from the Vanguard model in that, instead of employing random sampling of historical bond and T-bill returns, Nest Egg Guru requires users to enter an expected return proxy for the bond and cash portfolio allocations. This is because today's interest rates are much lower than the mean historical returns from the corporate bonds and T-bills. In other words, Nest Egg Guru believes that the bond data used in the Vanguard application may be overly optimistic relative to today. Thus, in our illustration, it will simply assume a 2% fixed rate of return on bonds, which roughly reflects the yield on a 10-year Treasury or 5-year CD today. For cash, we will assume a 0% return. An additional input in Nest Egg Guru that is absent from the Vanguard calculator is the ability to account for investment expenses and fees. Since the Vanguard calculator assumes, albeit unrealistically, that there are no expenses, Nest Egg Guru will assume 0 expenses as well. Lastly, while Nest Egg Guru offers the ability to test different withdrawal strategies to match the Vanguard model, in this illustration, we will also assume a constant asset allocation throughout retirement. Before we hit the Submit button, at this point, it should be becoming clear that the significant input variations and modeling assumptions exist even between calculators with similar designs and methodologies. So now, let's find out how the results compare. As you can see, the results from Nest Egg Guru's simulations were less optimistic than those produced by Vanguard calculator. In contrast to Vanguard's 87% success rate from its simulations, Nest Egg Guru's simulations were sustainable just 78% of the time. So which calculator's results are right? The answer is that the one that the user believes most closely represents his or her real-world circumstances. As the designers of Nest Egg Guru, our opinions on this matter are obviously biased. However, we believe that the 11 separate inputs we employ offer a more realistic model and that the assumptions we have made all users to test their preparedness in the context of the present-day investment environment. In particular, we believe it is important to account for multiple equity asset classes. We believe it is important to account for the current low interest rate environment considering the bond and cash allocations. And we believe it is important to account for investment expenses. And lastly, but definitely not least, we believe it is important to give the users the ability to test different withdrawal strategies. In conclusion, consumers and financial advisors should be aware that different calculators will invariably produce different and sometimes conflicting results. Before choosing a calculator, the user should take the time to understand the assumptions that are used in the methodology and to consider whether the inputs sufficiently reflect the user's actual portfolio and portfolio management strategies. At the end of the day, critical thinking is required in assessing the applicability of the output. We hope this video has enhanced your understanding of the differences between retirement planning calculators. Thank you for watching.